situation. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne. You are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Residue is not just another true crime podcast, but a necessary tool for those who want to understand the dangers lurking in the real world. You are listening to episode 67, Dating App Deception, the Murder of Chris Vo. As always, listener discretion is advised. On December 26, 2021, in Cleveland, Ohio, a shocking and tragic discovery unfolded when Connie Miller, a longtime client and close friend of hairstylist Chris Vo, arrived for her scheduled appointment the day after Christmas. For years, Connie had trusted Chris with her hair, and on that fateful day, she found herself driving to his home for another routine session. But as she approached the door, she noticed something deeply unsettling. Connie notices blood seeping out from beneath Chris's garage door. In a panic, Connie immediately called 911, and when the authorities arrived, she rushed them to the garage door where 57-year-old Chris would typically do his client's hair. Chris had lived a colorful, inspiring life. Originally from Vietnam, he had fled his home country as a refugee, embarking on a journey to pursue the American dream. Over the years, Chris lived in various places, California, New York, and Colorado, before settling in Cleveland, a city he came to love. Chris built his career as a beloved hairstylist, known for his unique personality and unwavering dedication to his craft. However, despite the acceptance and success he found in Cleveland, Chris carried a heavy secret. He never came out to his family, keeping his sexuality hidden and unable to share this part of himself with his family. As police arrive to the crime scene, Connie rushes them to the garage door where she tells them this is usually where Chris would do hair. Police enter and they find bloody footprints and an obvious struggle. Then they see the body of 57-year-old Chris Vo. He had blunt force trauma, sharp force trauma, a gunshot wound. He was hemorrhaging from his neck, which usually means strangulation. Chris lived alone at the time of his death, and he worked for years as a hairdresser, loved by his clients. So who would do this to Chris? Chris's 12-year relationship with his ex-partner, Nick Molesky, added complexity to his story. Nick, who had been with Chris for over a decade, described their relationship as one full of love and mutual respect. And despite their 23-year age gap, Nick would say of Chris, "He taught me how to feel beautiful and how to be loved." Although their time together ended amicably, Nick revealed this profound impact that Chris had on his life. Their bond had been deep, with Chris's journey to the United States, his quiet struggles, and the shared dreams that defined their years together as a couple. Now, as the police began their investigation into Chris's death, the mystery of what happened behind that garage door lingered in the air, leaving those closest to him searching for answers. Chris had a community of clients, friends, and loved ones. They're all now grappling with this devastation that they've just heard. Nick, Chris's ex-partner, actually received a call from his old neighbor, He used to live in this same home with Chris, and the neighbor called Nick hysterical, telling him, listen, there are tons of police at your old house. I think something happened to Chris. Police are on the scene in Cleveland, Ohio, at Chris's home, and as the neighbor is talking to Chris's ex-partner, Nick, police ask, Can we have that phone? Can we talk to Nick for a minute? Nick is completely obliging. He is giving the police as much information as he can. And obviously, the police are going to be suspecting Nick right away. This is an ex-partner. But Nick was completely cleared very quickly. Nick was with his family on the night of the murder, and police just didn't suspect Nick at all at this point. Now, the garage is the main crime scene, and as police enter, there are just bloody prints everywhere. They found live ammunition and one .380 shell casing, and a blonde wig. So all of this is taken as evidence. Police now search inside of the home, which they say was very cluttered. And when I say cluttered, I don't mean messy, I don't mean hoarder. Chris had a fabulous style. Chris loved dressing up. He had wigs galore. He had fancy costume jewelry, beautiful gowns. Chris did it up, and he did it right. So this night, Chris was wearing a blonde wig. Police find their first evidence, and they assume that the attack must have taken place inside of this garage. Police are starting to believe that the suspect ambushed Chris in his kitchen because as police search around the kitchen area, the refrigerator is left wide open. There is some strands of blonde hair inside of the refrigerator, and then there are strands of blonde hair on the floor with a little bit of blood next to them. And then those droplets of blood start leading up to the stairs that will then lead down into the garage. Upon entering the garage, the salon, police see that there is a pane of glass that is completely shattered, and underneath that glass is the blonde wig. They'll photograph the scene, swab the scene for all the bloody areas for DNA. They do realize there was no forced entry, so Chris probably knew the person that murdered him. The scene of Chris Vo's death raised immediate questions. Investigators quickly noted a subtle clue on his body. His ring finger was wiped clean. It was as though someone had deliberately removed a ring because Chris's entire body was so bloody and beaten, but one ring finger just completely clean. So was this a robbery? Chris probably knew the person responsible. As the medical examiner arrived and began their work, the investigators shifted their focus to figuring out who Chris had associated with recently. And one major breakthrough comes when they find Chris's cell phone in his bedroom. And this discovery was huge. It held potential to reveal key information. The phone was immediately sent to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, a security system is also found in Chris's bedroom. Turns out there were 4 cameras in total in that home. 3 on the exterior of Chris's house facing the driveway, and then 1 interior camera, which was located in the garage where Chris ran his business. Oddly, one of the exterior cameras seemed to have been moved to face the house rather than the driveway. So was this a planned homicide? So many questions still looming. Chris's ex-partner, Nick Molesky, provided insight into Chris's life, shedding light on some details. Nick mentioned that Chris had been making questionable relationship choices recently, letting people into his life without being careful. This raised more suspicions. Investigators turned their attention to Chris's business partners, his friends, and anyone who might have had a conflict with him recently. Police canvassed the neighborhood, speaking with neighbors who had observed Chris's frequent visitors, many people coming and going from his home. But was this simply due to his business as a hairstylist, or were some of these men potential romantic partners? Friends of Chris mentioned that after his breakup with Nick, he had been lonely and desperately searching for someone to fill the void in his life. The day after Chris's death, police were finally able to access the footage from the security cameras, and it was clear that this video evidence would be crucial in unraveling the mystery of what happened to Chris. As they started to review the footage, they hoped it would reveal the answers they so desperately needed, and it did. Around 8:38 p.m., a man walks to Chris's house. He looks around 20-something, Caucasian male wearing a t-shirt and jeans. On the camera placed inside of the garage, you can see Chris is waiting in the garage wearing a blonde wig and a dress. Chris loved to dress up. He loved to wear dresses and wigs. And this man who entered his home, he looked friendly. It looked like a possible date scenario. But as the police are watching more of the footage, a second individual arrives to the home. And now this individual is wearing a construction vest that is neon. He is wearing a mask. His face is covered and he's completely disguised. It's like he disguised himself to look as though he was a city worker or someone who was there to do work on the house or read the meter. Didn't look out of place if someone was driving by and just noticed this man walking around. This individual starts to unplug all of Chris's Christmas lights, and it is really dark outside right now, but this guy knows exactly where all the plugs are, unplugs everything, and then he walks up to the camera that is facing the driveway, and he looks up for a quick split second before he turns that camera to face the house so no one can see him on that camera anymore. You can find this actual footage on a true crime documentary show called A Plan to Kill. This is actually season 1, episode 2. They titled the episode When Kindness Kills. So this footage is crucial. I mean, this guy showed his face. They also found on the camera footage that the guy drove a truck. It was a Ram 2500 truck. And as he's backing out of the driveway, police could not see the footage of the license plate, but they now know the make and the model of the truck. So at least they have that. The rest of the footage captured that night is inside of the garage. Now, both men, they attacked Chris so brutally. The camera inside of the garage captured the end of that attack. And as the men are murdering Chris and he is laying there, they both hug each other. So that is another piece of crucial information for the police. Chris fought back hard. Chris fought like hell. Now he's laying there on the ground in his salon, and these two men are just standing above his body, hugging. On December 27th, 2021, this is 37 hours after Chris Vo's murder, police receive the report from the medical examiner. What it says is horrifying. Chris died from sharp force trauma, blunt force trauma, a gunshot wound, and strangulation. This is the most brutal overkill homicide. Was this a rage killing? Police definitely agree that this was premeditated because there was no forced entry. The camera was turned, and that second guy that showed up concealed his identity. Investigators have the make and model of the truck that these two individuals took to Chris's house. So, police start looking at city cameras, street cameras, neighbors' ring cam footage. They are looking everywhere to try and find this Ram 2500. And then a call comes in. The Cleveland police get a call from the Lakewood police, and these Lakewood police officers had two people in custody. On December 25th, 2021, just 1 hour after Chris's murder, Lakewood police were alerted when a stolen truck had entered its city. And how did they know it was stolen? Because this city of Lakewood had license plate readers installed, and this was to combat an epidemic of stolen vehicles in their city. So this truck was marked as stolen. Lakewood police track this truck down, and they find out that it is parked at a Travel Lodge motel. So police get on over to that Travel Lodge motel, and as they do, this truck is leaving the parking lot with two individuals inside of it. Police stop them, arrest them, get these two men into the back of their car, and then they search the truck. And inside of that truck, they find two handguns, drugs, a pile of needles, and Chris Vo's credit card. Immediately, a search warrant is issued for the hotel room, and inside that hotel room, investigators recover that traffic vest, that neon vest in the video that one individual was wearing. They also find a journal, and in that journal was Chris Vo's address. In that journal, there was more evidence that Chris's murder was planned. They had Chris's address, birthday, and some scribbled notes on how to clean with bleach. The two suspects that they found inside of that vehicle were Daniel Mobley and Chad Webb, both 27 years old, both convicted felons. They were dating. Daniel Mobley and Chad Webb are brought down to the police station, and when they are, Cleveland police find more evidence. They find a silver ring speckled with blood. This is the ring that was taken from Chris Vo's ring finger. In Chad's booking photo, his head has a ton of scrapes and cuts and scratches all over it. You know, the kinds of cuts and scrapes and bruises that you might get while you're trying to murder someone and they're fighting their hardest. They are fighting back as hard as they can. And this is all great evidence, and police are going to question Daniel and Chad. Daniel isn't going to say shit. He just shuts his mouth. Chad talks a little bit, but nothing that they could possibly use. And right now, what police are trying to question them about is, what is the connection between these two men and Chris? Because killing a stranger is very rare. So these guys had to know each other. Well, yes, they did. At least Chris Vo and Daniel Mobley knew each other. And this is going to piss you off. 6 months prior to the murder, Chris Vo had his car stolen. He reports his car stolen. Police figure out who stole the car. It was Daniel Mobley. Daniel Mobley is arrested. He is put in jail. Chris shows up at the court hearing for his sentencing, and he begs with the judge, please show this young boy leniency. That is the kind of person Chris was. Chris was so kind. His ex-partner, Nick, said of Chris, one of his favorite sayings was, "If you're good to me, I'll be 2 times better to you." So Chris stands up there in front of the judge, and he gives a victim impact statement, and he asks the courts to please be lenient with Daniel. And now, you think this kindness could change Daniel? Maybe this could show him a different path. He could be like, oh my God, there are good people out there. No, that is not what Daniel did. Daniel decided that Chris, being kind, was weak. And now Chris was going to have to be killed, because now Daniel is going to get his boyfriend Chad involved, and these two are going to prey upon the kindness of Chris Vo. But, how are they going to pull this off? Oh, well, Daniel has a brilliant plan. And police are going to figure out what that plan is, because the results from the cell phone, they are back. And let me tell you, the planning was immense. And it all involved a dating app. So Chad joins the same dating app that Chris is on. And Chad reaches out to Chris, pretending to be interested, pretending to want to start a relationship. Chad even sent pics to Chris. They were sending each other pics back and forth. They were really getting along. And like I said before, Chris was really desperate for companionship. And he really wanted to believe that Chad wanted the same things, that Chad wanted to be with him. In one of their last text communications on the dating app, Chris tells Chad, "I will meet you and you will walk in from the garage door." So police take this as premeditation, and that's all the proof they needed. After Chris invited Chad over, the two of them were alone for about 5 to 10 minutes before Daniel appeared on camera, unplugging the lights, turning the camera. And then the two of them murdered Chris together. But why? Why did they need to murder Chris? And the reason is drugs. Daniel and Chad were meth addicts. Police describe it as these two never knew where they were going to get their next fix. And then Chris came along showing all this kindness. And they knew, you know what, that guy's got to have some money. And that guy is going to let us in. It's completely sick as fuck preying on Chris's kindness. And Chris's desire to just be loved. But if these two are going to go to trial, police are going to need physical proof. They need that DNA to come back. And on March 2nd, 2022, it does. And it shows that Chris had Chad's DNA underneath his fingernails because, like I said, Chris fought back hard. Chris also had DNA on that ring that they found on Chad when he was arrested. They also found Chad's DNA on that ring. Daniel Mobley and Chad Webb were re-indicted to add the possibility of the death penalty in this case because this is a heinous crime. The prosecution wanted to go hard on these two, and they wanted nothing less than the death penalty. But something unexpected happens. A call comes in, and that call is going to change the entire course of this trial. Chris Vaugh's brother called the prosecution, and he begged, "My family does not want the death penalty because that is what Chris would have wanted." Chris's compassion shines through again. Finally, almost 2 years after Chris's murder on November 20th, 2023, sentencing day arrives. The judge always looks at a couple questions when sentencing, and one of the questions is, did the defendant exploit a relationship that he or she had with the victim? And a hell yes, Daniel did. So, Chad Webb is first. He receives 28 years. But the judge wasn't going to be as kind to Daniel Mobley, who received 36 years to life. The judge believed that Daniel was the mastermind in this whole murder plot. These two monsters brutally murdered someone, took advantage of this person's kindness, then they stole Chris's credit card. When police finally caught up to them, they had been partying, they had been going on shopping sprees, they were laughing, having the greatest time of their life. Monsters. It is painful to see how kindness, which is often seen as a strength, can be exploited by those who view it as nothing more than a weakness to take advantage of. And now on one side, you have these horrible people, just deplorable human beings. And then you have Chris.
Chris was just so enterprising and industrious, and he wanted to make it here in a big way. He was a renowned hairstylist. People would be in the mall and they'd walk by and see him, and they'd just be drawn to the glamour and the fantasy of his hair and what he wears. He even opened his own salon inside of our house. Chris really did have an amazing amount of substance.
Chris is one of those guys that you have to rubberneck when you see him, you know? He's just beautiful, fabulous, and very outgoing. He's like a glitter queen, you know? You can't miss him.
A glitter queen. That is the greatest compliment I've ever heard. Chris's close friend says, Chris would always say to her, "You can't cry about this because I don't want you to mess up your makeup." And that is just the kind of guy that Chris was. Thank you for joining me again on this week's episode of Residue. You know that I do appreciate you all so very much. Residue is created, hosted, researched, edited, written by Chrissy Champagne. That's me. I dig you guys so much, and it would be super cool if you could just hit that follow button so you can meet me back here every Tuesday at midnight. It would also be cool if you followed me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, Facebook at Residue A True Crime Podcast, TikTok at Residue Podcast. If you wanted to help out the podcast and brighten my day, it would be really awesome if you could leave a 5-star review or a positive review on any of the listening platforms. It really just helps other people to be able to find the podcast, and also just share. Oh, there's so much to say at the end. I feel like I just want to keep talking to you forever and ever, but I can't. I have to go, and I will see you again next Tuesday. And don't forget to stay safe and stay paranoid.